Hi there, I'm Maura. I booked a table just inches away from my husband's secret date, and then walked in with her real husband. Sounds crazy? That night shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the quiet ways people destroy each other. How did I get here? Why did I stay silent so long? And what happened after we all sat down? Have you ever uncovered a secret that made your whole world tilt? Would you confront it or walk away? Tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story too. The kitchen was quiet, save for the soft simmer of the sauce I hadn't tasted in months. Outside, golden leaves cartwheeled across our brick driveway, rustling against the silence in my chest. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions anymore, it just listens. I stirred the pot out of habit more than hunger, glancing up at the clock like it owed me an explanation. Sterling had been late 3 nights this week. A client dinner, he said on Monday. Emergency board call on Wednesday. I used to believe him. Lately, I just took notes. I set down the wooden spoon and grabbed my tablet from the counter. A habit, checking his calendar before planning our weekend. I wasn't snooping. I was married. At least I thought I still was. The notification blinked at me like it had something to confess. Dinner for 2, Lumiere, 7:30 p.m. Friday, window seat. At first I didn't react, not visibly. My fingers curled around the tablet so tightly my nails left crescent moons in the silicone case, but my face? Blank. I clicked it open. Reservation confirmed. She'll love it. My ears rang. Lumiere. The restaurant I once picked for our 10th anniversary. We never went. Sterling said it was too extravagant that year. We should be smart about money, he said, holding my face in his palms like I was something he still valued. I clicked deeper. The reservation was linked to his company card. I tapped open the expense log. It was already processed, flagged as client hospitality. I laughed. A dry, bitter sound that didn't quite make it out of my throat. He wasn't just betraying our vows. He was dragging our reputations through mud laced with corporate policy. Sterling taught seminars on ethical leadership. There would be irony in that, if it didn't sting so damn much. My phone buzzed beside me, a text from him. Running late. Don't wait up. Might grab food with Kent. I stared at the words like they belonged to someone else's life. Kent lived in Boston. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply sat. Long enough for the steam from the pot to fade into nothing. Long enough to remember the way his voice had changed when he said my name, like it was a task, not a tether. Long enough to remember how often I let things go, how often I turned silence into grace, hoping he'd notice the quiet meant something. I stood slowly and poured the sauce down the sink. It was too rich for someone with no appetite. That night he came home whistling, kissed my cheek like muscle memory. I let him. He asked how my day was. I said fine, because the truth wouldn't have fit in his version of reality. Later, I watched him sleep. His chest rose and fell, unaware that his lies now had a witness. I traced the edge of the pillowcase with my finger, steady, like a countdown. He thought I wouldn't notice. He'll learn how wrong he was. Friday night. The light in my office had turned golden, catching in the corners of bookshelves and casting shadows that felt heavier than they should. I sat at my desk, the cursor blinking in a blank email draft as if daring me to make the first move. I wasn't nervous, not anymore. I was something colder, focused, clean. I reread the calendar entry one last time. She'll love it. The gall, the indulgence, the absurd luxury of it all. There were no apologies in those 4 words, just assumption. That she existed, that she deserved it, that I would never find out. I typed slowly, deliberately. Professor Graham, I hope this finds you well. I'd like to invite you to join a small private dinner I'm hosting for faculty and visiting contributors this Friday evening at Lumiere. It was sterile, polite, academic. I even added, in recognition of your urban redevelopment paper published last spring. He hadn't written it for me, but it didn't matter. I just needed it to look real. I chose him because of a photo. Delaney's Instagram last fall, her hand on his back, cropped like an accident. But I remembered the caption, "My constant." I guess she wasn't expecting me to scroll that far back. The email flew off with a quiet whoosh. My stomach didn't flutter. My palms didn't sweat. If Sterling could curate a secret from months, I could manufacture an evening for one night. An hour later, the reply came. "Who else is attending?" No greeting, no thank you, just doubt. I dialed his office number. He picked up after 2 rings. "Professor Walker," he said, voice low and flat. "Hi, Graham. I wanted to follow up on my invitation." "Why Lumiere?" he cut in. "Why me?" I paused, then let out the softest laugh. "Honestly, I admired your latest case study. You speak like a builder. That's rare in policy." Silence. "You want to talk about zoning over foie gras?" he asked. "I want to talk to someone who actually understands how cities breathe. You're the first person who made me think of sidewalks like stories," I said. Another silence. This one less sharp. I could almost hear him weighing the lie, feeling for cracks, but I had polished it smooth. "I don't do well with surprises," he finally said. "You won't have to," I replied. "Just bring your mind and maybe an open calendar." He didn't confirm, but he didn't hang up. That was enough. I sat back, heart still quiet. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud, primal. This was something more calculated, precise. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to hold a mirror. That evening, I booked a reservation at Lumiere, directly adjacent to the table marked under Sterling's name. I selected the exact seat opposite mine, ensuring that when Graham sat down, his back would face Sterling. I'd be the one watching. I already knew what I would wear. The dress he once called dangerous in the right light. The one I hadn't touched since the last conference we attended as a couple. I wasn't walking in to confront. I was walking in to confirm. He'd be picking a wine. I'd be preparing the end. The morning began with the kind of quiet that only exists in homes trying too hard to appear normal. I poured orange juice into 2 glasses and placed one across from Ellie. She barely looked up. Her spoon scraped the edge of her bowl with a rhythm that scratched my nerves raw. She didn't ask about homework or the school counselor. Instead, she stirred cereal like it held answers. "Mom," she said finally without meeting my eyes, "do you think honesty is always worth it in a marriage?" The room tilted slightly, not from the question, but from the way she asked, too casual, too late. I set my glass down slowly. "It's important," I said, choosing each word carefully. "But sometimes, timing matters more." Her mouth pressed into a line. "Thought so." She stood up, left her bowl half full, and disappeared down the hall. I followed her minutes later, telling myself it was just a teenager's mood. But something gnawed at the base of my spine. Her bedroom door was cracked. I knocked. No answer. I stepped in, guilt forming before permission. On her desk was a spiral-bound notebook, slightly open. I didn't mean to read it. But the words weren't hidden. They were scratched in black ink, furious and trembling. I wish I didn't know. The blood drained from my face. She had seen it, somehow. I turned as she entered, face already crumbling. "I didn't mean to." "I saw his phone," she said, voice barely there. "Weeks ago. I saw the messages. And I saw him at the bookstore. With her." She wiped her cheek, as if brushing away a mosquito, not tears. "I didn't say anything. I thought if I ignored it, it wouldn't be real. But it is. And now I feel like I'm lying too." I reached for her, but she stepped back. "I thought if I held it in, you and Dad wouldn't break." I was wrong. Before I could form the right apology, or any apology, my phone buzzed on the dresser. I glanced at it. Subject: Scholarship Essay Error. It was from Ellie's school. The admin had accidentally featured her essay on the public homepage for all parents and students to see. I clicked the link. My stomach turned. My parents are the definition of love and loyalty. I want to be like them. My hands trembled. Ellie leaned over, reading it aloud in a flat voice. I want to be like them, she repeated, then laughed, sharp, ugly. What a joke! I grabbed her hand. She yanked it away. You could have told me, she hissed. You should have told me. And burden you with that? I snapped. You're 17. I wanted to keep one corner of your world intact. But you didn't, she said. You just made sure I was the last to know. Again. We stood there, breathing through the wreckage. There were no raised voices, just the kind of cold honesty that doesn't need to shout to land its blow. Eventually she let me hold her cheek against my collarbone, her tears soaking the shoulder of my old sweatshirt. We didn't talk after that. No more apologies, no promises, just silence that understood what words couldn't fix. This wasn't forgiveness. It was survival. I thought the confrontation would be at the table, but it started here, in my own kitchen. The call came just after my second cup of coffee. I was mid-sentence, lecturing on urban redevelopment, when my phone vibrated against the podium. I glanced down, expecting a student emergency, but the caller ID made my breath catch. First National Bank. I paused, the words on my tongue dissolving. Class dismissed for today, I said flatly, already gathering my things as confused murmurs followed me out the door. In my office, the voice on the line was apologetic but firm. Several recurring payments from your joint account have failed. Utilities, mortgage, your daughter's college savings contribution. We flagged it for possible fraud. It wasn't fraud. It was sterling. I opened the banking app. Every shared account read, access restricted. The balances were still there, but I couldn't touch a cent. I felt the blood rush to my face, then drain as if someone pulled the plug. I dialed him. He answered on the second ring. Mora, he said, that professional calm tone he uses when he's about to say something cruel under the guise of reason. Given the current instability between us, I've moved our assets into protective holding. You understand. It's precautionary. I don't understand at all, I said. You locked me out of our accounts. I secured them, he corrected. Just until things are more settled. You mean until you're sure I won't make a move you didn't script? Let's not make this dramatic, he sighed. You've always hated when things get messy. I hung up before I said something I'd regret, and regretted not saying it instantly. Back at my desk, I opened my email, praying for a distraction. Instead, I found a quarterly bonus confirmation. At least something had gone right. I clicked into the deposit trail. It should have hit my personal research account, but it hadn't. I followed the transaction chain until my stomach turned. 3 months ago, the funds had been rerouted, for convenience, to our secondary savings account. Under his name, gone. No recourse. Not without him signing a release. I sat behind the wheel of my car in the faculty lot, engine off, eyes wide and hands slack on my lap. I didn't scream. I didn't sob. I just whispered, it was mine. All of it. Gone like it never existed. The kind of pain that doesn't rise with heat but sinks with weight. I spent the next hours pinging university HR, legal aid, and calling my sister, who answered on the third try, kids yelling in the background. You want me to wire you what? Jesus, Mora! What the hell is happening over there? I didn't explain. There wasn't time for pity. Instead, I printed the petition papers. Not for divorce, not yet, but for legal separation, an official mark in the sand. I started a notebook that night, not a diary, a ledger, every transfer, every withdrawal, every conversation with his name on it, facts, dates, witnesses. He played lawyer, I would play archivist. He'd shut the doors, but I'd started building a new key. The jazz bar was quieter than I remembered. Warm brass tones drifted through the room, curling around the low hum of conversation. I spotted Graham at a corner table, posture rigid despite the mellow setting. His coffee sat untouched, going cold in a ceramic cup too elegant for its job. Long day? I asked as I slid into the seat across from him. He nodded. They all are now. We didn't speak for a while. We didn't need to. The weight in the air wasn't new. It had simply settled differently tonight. I've been meaning to ask, I said eventually, my voice carefully neutral. Why didn't you leave her sooner? He looked at me like I'd asked something obscene. Then his expression softened, like a wire had snapped behind his eyes. 16 years ago, he began, his voice low. I got offered a fellowship in Paris, a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. Teaching, research, everything I'd worked for. He paused, eyes fixed on a point beyond me. Delaney told me, you promised you'd build something with me. Don't run away just when it matters. The bitterness in his smile wasn't masked. I thought loyalty meant choosing her over me. I stared at him, the air thinning in my chest. How many times had I done the same? Silenced my own ambitions under the guise of unity? I didn't go, he added, and every year after it got harder to believe I ever could. I reached for my glass but didn't drink. Instead, I whispered, we both gave up too much for people who kept taking. He glanced down, then tentatively reached across the table. His hand brushed mine, the gesture small but seismic. I didn't pull away right away, but when I did, it was slow and deliberate. We're not whole, I said quietly, and we're not safe. He nodded once. That kind of agreement hurt more than any argument. The next morning the damage came with a ringtone. My phone buzzed before sunrise. A friend from faculty texted, "Turn on the news, you're in it." I opened the link, a gossip podcast, grainy audio playing over dramatic music. "I'll give up everything if you ask me to." Graham's voice, younger, desperate. The clip ended, followed by speculation. Sources say he was unhinged. Rumor has it he stalked his ex. This is why tenure should require mental health screening. The audio had been twisted into poison. Delaney's signature move, frame the pain as madness, make loyalty look like obsession. When I called Graham, he didn't pick up. When I texted, it showed as delivered, nothing else. I sat alone, scrolling through comments that piled up like ash. Coworkers I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about a man they'd never met. I thought of his face last night, how hard it had been for him to share anything real, and how quickly that vulnerability had been weaponized. Delaney didn't just want to ruin him, she wanted to erase him. And now, I wasn't sure aligning with him didn't mean erasing myself, too. The whispering started before I even sat down. My office door had barely clicked shut when a knock came. Hannah, an earnest grad student with two wide eyes, stood there, phone in hand, lips parted but uncertain. "Dr. Ellison, I think you should see this." The blog post was already viral, titled, "Tenure with Perks, The Hidden Life of Maura Ellison." It read like a punch to the throat. Anonymous, but laced with enough personal details that the authorship was obvious. Delaney didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. It accused me of inappropriate relationships with subordinates, of reallocating grant funds for personal use, of increasingly erratic behavior. There were dates, fake receipts, even a photo from a department retreat where I'd hugged a colleague in a perfectly ordinary way. But with the right caption, it became damning. The comment section was a bonfire of speculation. Classic narcissist behavior. Isn't this the woman who cried at the dean's mixer? She's mentally unwell, always has been. I closed the door and stared at the floor. A memory surfaced. Me, 6 weeks postpartum, curled on the floor of the laundry room, gasping while Sterling stood above me and whispered, "You need to get it together. You're making us look pathetic." The pain then had been private. Now it was performed for the internet. 2 hours later, HR summoned me. They couched it as concern. It might be wise to take some space. A leave of absence while things cool down. I stared at the woman offering this with a rehearsed frown, and I realized how many people preferred discomfort to confrontation. I nodded. I didn't argue. That would feed the fire. In my car, I sat until the afternoon turned gray, the dashboard blurred behind tears I refused to let fall. The leather steering wheel was warm under my palms. I gripped it like a lifeline. "I built this," I said aloud. "From scratch. I stayed late, mentored kids no one else would. I carried my name like a damn shield. My voice cracked. And now it's being dragged through algorithmic sewage. The worst came later. A student forwarded a second post. This one was shorter, sharper, less story, more shiv. It included a link to a document, scanned notes from my therapy sessions after Ellie's birth. Somehow, someone had gotten hold of them. The PDF showed my name. The notes referenced a temporary prescription. A single line read, "Feels overwhelmed, fears failing as mother." That was enough. The blog spun it as proof of academic instability and emotional volatility. My upcoming board presentation was pulled without explanation. A colleague I'd known for 15 years didn't return my wave in the parking lot. That night, I opened my laptop with shaking hands. I stared at a draft resignation email I'd typed the week before. My cursor hovered over send, then I hit delete. Instead, I opened a new document, legal affidavit template. I began to type slowly, methodically, facts, dates, screenshots. "They picked the wrong target," I whispered. "Let them mistake me for someone who folds." The dishes were still in the sink, and the TV hummed in the background as I scraped leftover pasta into the trash. I wasn't listening until I heard his name. Sterling Caldwell has been named a person of interest in the reopening of a missing teen investigation. My hand froze midair. The plate shattered in the sink. On screen, grainy footage of a 17-year-old girl, Nia Reynolds, last seen 5 years ago. She'd been a summer intern in a community program Sterling's foundation had sponsored. The anchor's tone sharpened, mentioning rumors of internal cover-ups, cash donations, a high-profile mentor figure who was questioned but not charged. I sank into the nearest chair, bile rising. I remembered that summer. Sterling was exhausted all the time, saying the outreach program was too emotional, too draining. He shut it down abruptly, claimed funding had dried up. I never asked why. I trusted him. God, I trusted him. I turned off the TV, but the air still buzzed. My laptop was open before I realized I'd moved. I found archived articles, old forums. I dug. And what I unearthed felt like mud caked under fingernails, impossible to ignore, harder to wash off. There were whispers, a previous complaint, quietly dismissed, a staffer who resigned, a settlement. At 1:07 a.m., an email came. No subject line, no signature. Inside was a voice memo. "I kept quiet for 5 years. He paid me. It bought silence, not peace." The voice cracked, weathered, exhausted, honest. "He gave me $50,000 through an LLC registered in Colorado. Told me it was for grief counseling. I used it to move across the country. But now I see your name everywhere, your face. I saw what they did to you, and I can't be quiet anymore." Attached was a PDF, a wire transfer. Company name matched a defunct holding group I'd seen once. On an old tax form Sterling had me sign without reading. I closed the laptop. My reflection stared back from the black screen, eyes swollen, mouth pressed into a pale line. I grabbed my coat, the keys. I didn't care that it was raining. I drove with knuckles white on the wheel, streets slick with rain and silence. The all-night diner's neon sign flickered like it couldn't decide if it still had fight left. She waited in a corner booth, hoodie up, hands trembling around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. We didn't hug, didn't cry. We traded names, not stories. Her eyes told enough. I laid the document between us like a weapon. She nodded once. That was it. Truth doesn't scream. It doesn't kick doors. It sits still and waits for the world to look away. Then it rises. "I'm going to burn him down," I said, barely a whisper. "With truth, not rage." The office smelled like old law books and fresh betrayal. Graham sat across from me, hands clenched, eyes darting toward the legal envelope on the table like it might bite. "She filed for full custody," his lawyer said, too calm for the storm she'd just unleashed. "Cites emotional volatility, unstructured home, prior psychological manipulation." Graham's mouth parted, but no words came. I watched the color drain from his face, watched the flash of recognition in his eyes, the one that said, "She knows where to hit hardest." "This isn't about Noah," he said, voice hoarse. "She doesn't care about parenting. She never has." I didn't disagree. "You said she wouldn't weaponize him," I said, quieter than I meant to. He looked away. Neither did I. Delaney's case was pristine on paper. Volunteer work, polished photos with Noah at some overpriced pumpkin patch, an Instagram caption that read, "Motherhood saved me." She hadn't asked what grade he was in since last spring. By Friday, I found Graham in his kitchen, barely touching his coffee. Noah shuffled in from the den, clutching a tablet like it was a trophy. "I heard Mom talking on the phone. She said I was leverage." He placed the device on the table. I thought that wasn't okay. The recording was short, but brutal. Delaney's voice was unmistakable, sharp, smug, careless. "He'll fight back, but we'll drag him in circles. The kid's just leverage. He's not even close to getting custody. Not with what I've got on him." Graham stood up, turned away, and held the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I don't want him to hear any more of this," he whispered. "We'll keep him out of it. But this goes to court." The audio file hit the court's docket before Monday morning. The judge, gray-haired and unsmiling, played it aloud in chambers. No commentary, no theatrics, just silence so heavy it seemed to compress the air. Delaney's lawyer objected. The judge waved her off. "I'm suspending the custody motion until a full psychological evaluation is complete," she said, "and until then, Noah will remain in Graham's care, effective immediately." Delaney's eyes burned. Graham didn't look at her once. Outside the courthouse, he knelt to hug his son. Not tight, not dramatic. Just real. I watched them from a few steps back, arms crossed, wind slicing through the cold October morning. "This isn't over," I said under my breath. But for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like air returning to lungs, like dignity clawing its way back up the throat. Let justice breathe, just a little longer. 3 months later, the world had moved on. But I hadn't. Not entirely. I walked alone beside Lake Michigan, wrapped in a scarf that didn't quite block the chill. The sky was soft and gray, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The court had ruled. Graham had full custody. Sterling was under internal review. Delaney had disappeared behind a wall of silence and scrubbed social media. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt emptied. I stopped near a bench, where waves tapped against the shore like the ticking of some eternal clock. The wind carried a memory, silk against my legs, the soft echo of heels on polished floors. That night. Lumiere glowed gold from the inside, all soft laughter and expensive illusion. I walked in, dressed not to impress, but to endure. He was already there. Sterling, leaning across the table toward Delaney, laughing, relaxed in that way only the truly entitled ever are. I didn't stop, didn't speak. I just walked past, slowly, silently, deliberately. Then Graham stepped through the door behind me. He didn't touch me, didn't nod. He just followed my lead. I didn't need to tell Sterling anything. My silence sliced deeper than confrontation. Delaney looked up, saw him, froze. Her smile evaporated like steam off a shattered plate. We didn't sit, we didn't linger. We just existed, in their presence, long enough for it to sting. Back in the present, I found myself turning away from the lake. Home waited. So did loose ends. At the house, I slid open the drawer where old photographs used to live. I pulled out the ones of Sterling and set them aside. Not with rage, not with nostalgia, just with clarity. His name came off my estate documents the same week. Ellie stood in the kitchen, holding her laptop. She looked up and said, "Are we okay now?" I paused. "Not yet, but we're trying." Later that evening, Graham and I shared dinner in the quiet corner of a small bistro. Not a date, not closure, just peace. He lifted his glass. Thank you for standing beside me. I shook my head gently. I stood for myself too. He smiled. Not wide, just enough. Back home, an email pinged. I opened it. Congratulations, Professor Caldwell. Your paper has been accepted for the national conference. I didn't smile. I didn't jump. I just closed the screen. Ellie was curled on the couch, reading. For once, I didn't look past her. I just looked at her. Justice isn't always loud. And healing doesn't come with applause. Sometimes the people we trust the most carry the sharpest blades, and they cut without warning, without guilt. I've learned that silence can be power, truth can be messy, and healing rarely looks the way you expect. But if you hold your ground, if you fight smart, not loud, you begin to reclaim yourself. Not to get even, but to get free. What would you have done differently if you were in my shoes? Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken, or spoken when you should have walked away? Let's talk about it. Leave me a comment, even just a 1, if this story struck a nerve. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you didn't like the story, that's okay too. Tell me why. I'm here to listen. If this video moved you even a little, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. There's more to come, and every chapter we share helps someone else feel seen.